가진거 잡고 N1
Many software systems I've seen end up looking a bit like this, where we kind of make things kind of work. Even got tips, so like I like to run, so I bring my trainers and I bring a coffee pot to some places, and usually there's an iron in a hotel room, so that's like the use for it. I generally find on weekends to brew our coffee because they don't give us a means of heating up our coffee pot in some other ways. So what do we do with our code? We get to do some really quite cool and interesting things. Like we really have well organized things, and we have the right interactions, so we can do amazing things. Lots of people work together because no one individual can do anything really impressive on their own. Like this year we got to have this photograph, which is actually very cool. It looks like a simple little thing, but it's actually our first picture ever of a black hole. That involved 8 telescopes all around the world, and the data for it was collected much sooner than it was actually available. One of the problems why we got to see it a little bit later than we'd like to is one of those telescopes was in Antarctica, and there was so much data. We're talking about 5 petabytes of data to generate this picture, and that is hundreds of kilograms of disks that need to be shipped, because transporting that data is not easy. Also, once you've been in Antarctica, your Wi-Fi connection doesn't really be that good for shipping lots of data, so you have to actually ship the disks, physically ship them. And during the winter, it's not a place you want to fly in and out of, so there's a code of behaviors you don't land aircraft in Antarctica in the winter. Now, one of the things that's interesting that's come out of this, so the way those sort of photographs are taken is you take a lot of photographs of all very poor quality, then we use software to refine it and distill the essence out, and we eventually get something that's nice and crisp. Now, think about codes of conduct for a second. This is an amazing piece of software that's given us black holes. What else have we now done with that? People are now starting to take that software, take photographs from hundreds of meters away of people's keys, and using that to get a detailed picture of someone's keys, where they can actually copy the keys and break into locks. I think our industry has some interesting questions to answer about what we do with some of the technology that we produce, and do we just like cool stuff, think it's kind of fun. That's a kind of a sort of side thing from we start to think about codes. But I talk a little bit about protocols and what they have for software development. We hear this term a lot. We often misuse words a lot in our industry. But I want to explore how significant are protocols to software development itself. So let's actually go back to the dictionary and look at what is a protocol. One of the reasons I care a lot about this is I'm dyslexic, and so I struggle a lot with words. One of the things I often do when I think of any new subject is I look words in the dictionary. I always do this to find out what's the true essence, and I find we misuse stuff all the time. Now, we have things like protocol buffers. Sorry, they're not actually a protocol. Protocol buffers are an encoding, so kind of classic of our industry misnaming things. One of my favorites is random access memory. Well, I'm just going to give you something random. I want something very specific in an address. So arbitrary access memory, that's just going to get a little bit too pedantic. But it's kind of important. So a protocol, like we look at it, it's a code prescribing a strict adherence to correct etiquette and precedence. Etiquette we kind of can rock a little bit. Precedence is really interesting and important in this. So the order in which things happen is very important, and that's actually key to a protocol. And we'll explore that quite a bit. It's a technical side that we often see. We're talking about a set of conventions governing the treatment and formatting of data in an electronic communication system. We often just think of the formatting, we miss the treatment, we miss the etiquette, the precedence. These are some of the really important things. So before we get right into the technology, we'll wind right back in history and look at where some of this comes from. So where do we use codes and protocols and etiquette in some of our history? Where's it come from? It's a really interesting work back done by Charles Darwin. A few people may have heard of him, so Origin of the Species and stuff. One of his other subjects that he was highly passionate about was understanding how people would interact and how they'd use visual expressions of behavior to drive how they interacted. And he did a lot of studies on this and discovered that independent of language, and they went even further than just learned behavior, we have instincts that helps us interact. And we can have, so for example, shame, disgust, joy, concepts like that. We don't need to have them translated. We can see from people's behavior. And we don't need to learn that because it's been observed in young children, it's been observed in people who are blind, it's been observed in some people who unfortunately grow up now. Disgust. So things like that. So we can see that. So we interact with each other, and some of these behaviors helps us understand that. So it's kind of neurological to us, and we're involved in it over time. So it takes on into things like manners and etiquette. Etiquette is an old French word. It means a little card or a little note. So we'll have things like keep off the grass. So that started at the Palace of Versailles, Louis XIV, was making it clear people how they should behave. So this is where that stuff comes from. But that's a society means a function. We can scale, and we can do things on a larger scale because of some of these things. Manners, sort of etiquette, courtesy, different things. This is how we function at any sort of level of skill. It's interesting. Some data, you can dig into and study. They kind of like sum it up. There's 3 layers to it. And the most basic layer, we have what are known as our hygiene, style manners, or hygiene behaviors. And these are for prevention of disease. So we should discuss the 60-part environment to us. So we still learn certain things because this helps prevent disease being spread. So it's kind of key and important to what we do. Then evolve things like medicine. So the aim is working medicine as a front offering to show these sorts of things. We're demonstrating those that are important for the individual. So if we can do that, we will function as a large person. We display these types of behavior. And this lets us function at a higher level. A good example of this would be if a small group of people divided up into different types of roles. You find warriors, you find farmers, you find killers, all of these different things. And warriors can so easily take everything from everywhere else because that's kind of their job. They can find they can be the thugs in the group. But the way they're protection, they won't do that. Farmers, they never feed, wouldn't work as a unit going forward. So people can learn to behave as well. The third level is when you form dogs. So there's a one nice level of doing stuff that's much trust. And one of the biggest efficiencies. And then it's when you have those people behave in a normal function. You don't trust them. There's no one to do this. So if people behave in a natural way, you cannot trust them. If people regard it as inefficient or inefficient interactions, we start to see some of this. It's the kind of thing that so if someone in a group doesn't behave the way the rest of the group does, we have hardwired instincts where we want to punish them for doing that. And even worse, we punish others who observe it and they don't punish them. And it's kind of funny that we always can't control some of this behavior, so it kind of drives a little bit of what we do. So that's kind of sort of biological and evolutionary side of it and how it's driven some societies. We've taken this moment to having four protocols. What's interesting though is this is how we have international law protocols around warfare and what we can do. So rules of engagement, which is something the military understand very well, is broken down into what's acceptable. When you're in war, not everything's acceptable. Because it's such a bad thing for you to be able to do what you want to. We need to try and pull that back and make it impossible. It's right in the international law. Concepts in there is you want to make conditions to see. It's a lot about sometimes speaking at conferences like can deeply uncomfortable. I feel like I actually like to hide behind. I'm a person who likes to code. You get to meet some cool and interesting people. I got to meet General Mike Jackson out of the
Muchísimo son pocos lados.
Things where he's explaining what happens in World War I. He's one of the most recognised British generals in history, most famously for almost avoiding World War III in Kosovo, where he had a standoff with Russian colonel who had taken an airfield that was ordered by the Pentagon to go in and take this airfield, and he didn't follow an order from a five-star general. But the end of it got resolved, and then he talked about how people interact, how you give orders and different things. It's kind of fascinating. But he talked about how you should never try to crush an enemy. The only point ever going to war for him was to change the mind of the other side, to create good conditions to succeed. So even though he was famous as a soldier, that was the absolute last thing he ever wanted to do. And so some of the laws that are around here, so like the Latin terms of just a bellow, is about the right to go to war, how to do war rightly. And this is all codified. So we talk about the codes, we codify things, we have a protocol for how we interact. Like one example is, you don't just go to war, you have to follow diplomatic procedures first to try to avoid it, and also you've got to be proportionate. So for example, if a small country sort of destroys one of your ships and you're a superpower, you just don't go and have a nuclear attack on their capital. That is completely unacceptable. So you have to have a proportional response. It's interesting how we code these things up. How we code things up in software, and how we think about this. How components interact. And this drives a lot of our software. We're not working with distributed systems, we're working with logic concurrent systems. To do anything at scale involves things interacting. One of the best places we have good examples of this is the IETF, the Internet Intelligence Source we have, protocol specified by how different components work. Put out the 1st of April every year they put out quite a fun RFC. One of my favourites is the African Coffee Pot Control Protocol. It's someone who's obsessed by coffee. And it's kind of fun, yes, and it's quite informative. I love some of the status codes like, show one of the meet on a team, have a coffee pot. Please don't ask me to do some coffee stuff. The origin of the words that are used in that begin in Little Indian. Basically comes from Gulliver's Travels, so adventures in Lilliput. But the people went to war over which end of your egg do you eat first. And you beat the big end or the little end, is that the way you eat your eggs? And so Indianness comes from that. But this explains some of that history, but also the origin of a lot of computer science of why we code integers the way they are, done in an incredibly fun and really great way to read. So that's a big one to go fight against. It's the first computer one in 1980. I'm guessing many people in this room were even born after that. Like, another big one is the transmission of IPs and alien characters. It's a pigeon house to do different things. Like that goes back to 1990. That was updated with quality of service later on, and eventually, well, recently for IPv6. So, easy learning some of this stuff can be quite good fun. And so you think like, oh yeah, it's kind of nerds, but there's lots of things we can learn from some of these things in our history. And should we document our protocols? Is kind of an interesting question. I love to document protocols on my projects because I think it just helps my own thinking, it helps me realize how to work my way through stuff. And particularly I find this debate very often comes up as API versus protocol. Basically, I think an API is very anemic. It's a very two-dimensional view of something. It doesn't really cover most of what's important. And most important to me in this is precedence, order in which you do things matters much more. So you think about an API, it doesn't tell you anything about precedence. It tells you what functions it can perform, but it doesn't say in which order they should be performed. It doesn't say what are exceptions for things that are interesting. So let's take a simple example. So let's say I have a file system and I want to interact with a file. What is my protocol? I'm allowed to interact with a file. I can publish an API, but it doesn't tell me as much as doing something like this. Let's say if I publish a file, I can perform any number of operations on it. People tend to do things like this, like a pseudo-regular expression language, where I can open a file, I can follow it by zero or more read or write operations followed by a close. That's totally what the precedence is. And for files, we take that as kind of obvious. It's not an API you're using every day. How do you know the orders in which you should use it? But you call this and throw an exception and you end up with putting buttons. So you should call this something first, but you actually just documented the order in the first place. It's a bit much easier to do. And so you can then just expand it, give the order of things called, list each functions. That's great. I find this is so much more useful way to design an interface for the system. Here we go. But kind of important as well, when you perform any one of these actions, discretion is really important. What can possibly go wrong? I've had the pleasure of working with a guy who's worked on a lot of systems that are very important, like people die if the systems don't work well. He worked for NASA for the US Air Force and sent stuff into space. And you think your software could end up causing someone's life to be extinguished. This is not a good thing. So you start to think more carefully about what can possibly go wrong, how to get stuff go right. And it's actually one of the biggest causes of software failure to this report here is really, if you haven't already seen it, is it explores what was the things that were behind major production outages in certain types of systems. And the thing that stood out to me in this was there's a number of different points. But 25% of the numbers they found caused a production outage were error codes or exceptions. So when they dug into them, many of the exceptions that were relevant to do in the exception matters, we should fix this before we go into production. Did you know code conduct or behavior allow you to release software that can build these sorts of problems? So that's not very professional. So it's kind of interesting how we go forward with this. So let's look at design and protocol and look at a realistic example of something more complicated and how we could approach it. And this is kind of where I find it's interesting between those who have a background in some of how the world works, how larger scale systems work, and come up with much more interesting algorithms than typically the nerds who only ever worked on their own. Because I think if your whole sphere of influence, your reference frame for the world is very narrow, it means you've got a very narrow view of what you can come up with. So multicast protocols are fascinating for this because you're dealing with sending data from one point over many points to many points. So it's a complicated interaction. It's not just a point-to-point simple thing. And if you want to design a protocol where you're going to send out data from a single source and it's going to go to many receivers, the data can get lost on the way. How do you realize that the data has been lost and how do you end up recovering? What's the protocol you go through for that? Do you try to centrally coordinate it? Do you try to do something different in there? And this is the problem that's been faced a number of times. And as you do it, you end up with some very obvious problems if you try to implement it. So one of them is act implosion. So if you realize the data can be lost, one of the ways you deal with it is you give an acknowledgement, a positive acknowledgement, and you've got the data, and that's great. The problem is that doesn't scale up because if you get more receivers, that's more things acting. So then the source can't cope with that. You've got a scaling problem. The other side, if we can go with, is we'll send negative acknowledgements because we'll assume it'll work most of the time, and if it doesn't work, we'll send the knack and recover from that. But that does work. Loss tends to be correlated. There'll be some network device along the way has a power overrun and it starts to drop data, and that means everybody who will be downstream from that doesn't get the data, so they'll all knack, and you end up overcoming coming source. So we ended up with this NAC implosion. Now, there was many implementations and approaches to solve this sort of problem, and it didn't really get very far until this particular paper came out. And the first name on this paper is Sally Floyd. Her and Ron Jacobson are behind an awful lot of made the internet successful. And this one particular protocol, I think, is really very elegant. And so she had this very simple idea that if you end up getting lost, rather than NAC straight away and say, I have a DMP, send it to me straight away, you do something different. What you do is you set a random timer for quite a short period of time into the future. It's usually based on what is the round trip time between you and the source, and you set that random timer. Because this is going to be correlated. Others are going to have the problem as well. So they've all set the random timer. They're going to go off at slightly different times. And when they go off, the first one to go off, well, it seems like, have I received this data in the meantime? No, I haven't received the data. I'll send the NAC to the source to get in and transmit the data. Others are going to have their NACs go off at different times as well as the random timers. But the first one to send it gets the data, we send it, everybody else has received it. And this way it fills in for the loss, and the rest cancel their NAC timers whenever they start to see the data. And notice there is no central control to that. It's a protocol to how they should interact. Now, if you look into some of Sally's history, she's a PhD in computer science, she's got a master's in computer science, she's got degrees in physics. Her very first degree was in sociology. I think it tells us something about how sometimes people will think differently about the world with a different background. And this was, again, a brilliant piece of work, which she used standard distribution. Other people then came along later and built on this idea, and they came up with the idea that, well, if we use a standard distribution, we still do get a bit of clustering around the midpoint of where the NACs can go off. If we do an exponentially linear distribution, we steer towards the end, but we cut off the beginning sufficiently that the probability of a NAC goes out quite soon, but not from very many sources. It actually makes it more optimal. And it did. I've implemented these protocols, and it actually works beautifully well. There's no central control, there's no complexity, and it gives you really great results. I find it fascinating that a lot of these large-scale network protocols that work well, some of the really influential people who've been involved have come from other disciplines, and surprising things like sociology have come into both that. So you talk about the hard and the soft skills that Kent mentioned earlier. Sometimes the soft skills that we have been talking about in the past are way more important to make a technology succeed, even in an algorithm to get it right. So kind of getting worth is what is the interaction. So we've got a large subject here. Where should we focus when we want to learn about some of this? Because there's many subjects and many subtopics to this, like how we layer stuff, how we version, how we encode, how we manage feedback within these, how we sequence, async. I'm not going to cover all of these, but I want to give you a little bit of flavour of what are some of the subjects and topics involved in designing good protocols, and hopefully maybe inspire some people to think a little bit about it. But let's start off with sort of looking at some encoding, and I'll ask a quick question, like, who cares about waste here? You use text-based protocols, do you encode stuff in JSON or XML, anything like that? I get to measure lots of real-world systems, and usually encoding in text is one of the most expensive things you'll see in a system. I often see more CPU cycles go to encoding and decoding data than doing business logic, and that just doesn't feel right. So one thing I sort of think about is, if you're using text-based codecs, maybe you should consider using binary codecs. They're much more efficient. And usually at this point, I'm sure many people are thinking in their own head, but it's human readable. That's called BS on that. Text is not human readable in a file. I know a few people who can read ASCII. I know nobody who can read UTF-8. You've got tools that can read it. That's the interesting step that's happened, is we have good tooling. We need better tooling to read binary. I've worked on projects where people invested in the tooling to read binary, and it works really well. So often, if we're going to sort of make a decision, make sure we're attributing where the real problem is here. Back to the lack of tooling, not that you can read text. You have tools that can read text, it's kind of different. And you can start doing quite interesting things. Like I work on binary protocols quite often. This is a header of one of the things I worked on. And you get to do pretty ASCII often stuff when you define it, but then you can design tools and stuff afterwards to read this to be able to deal with it. There are lots of good examples out there of how to do very efficient encoding of data. SVE I worked on SEN1. There's some of these protocols, we're not talking about percentage points faster. We're talking 2 and 3 orders of magnitude more efficient than some of the text-based protocols that use CPU cycles on. Again, this is one of my sort of sidelines. The ITRS report that came out in 2015 shows that we continue on our current trajectory of spending energy in data centers. By 2040, we're not going to have enough energy on the planet to feed our data centers. And that includes how we're increasing our energy production on the planet at the same time. So this whole thing of let's just hardware out the problem is not fly anymore, and it's going to get significantly worse as we go forward. Don't get run over. Let's go back to the it's an interesting subject as well. So we have a protocols, we want to version of protocols themselves. We don't know what conversation we're having. Kind of obvious one, most people kind of can get that. The messages themselves should be versioned, so we know which encoding we have of it, because we can extend them, we can add fields. So these things live. We make mistakes, we need to get better at them as we go. So whatever we put together must be able to be versioned, must be able to be extended, then we can big upgrade everywhere. Because before upgrade parts of your system, upgrade other parts of the system, that gives us the ability to scale within an organization. One part of it that I'm starting to learn a lot more about myself and didn't appreciate before is that versioning the instances of the data starts to really matter. You can make your algorithms themselves so much simpler. So I work on distributed consensus and network protocols, and I love how some of our protocols have gone to the point where they're designing to make them easy to understand. And that being a primary goal is a really good thing. It's almost like we get pride of the fact that we do clever things that virtually no one can understand. That's not a good thing. We should be designing things that other people can understand and building versioning in. So yeah, as mentioned before, that I worked on the disruptor, I've worked on many concurrent systems, and I've worked on things that have been really struggling with the multi-producer, multi-consumer problem. It's a design flaw whenever people end up using queues that are multi-producer, multi-consumer and similar sorts of systems, but we have to deal with it until people learn how to design a bit better. So how do we create good algorithms for that? I've implemented a number of them myself. I made mistakes in them, and having explored the whole area, I ended up having a light bulb moment when I was reading as much research around this as I could find. And I came across 1024cores.net, the work of Dmitry Yukov, and the genius in his implementation that made it so easy to understand and easy to deal with. He versioned every single state, he made the whole thing monotonic. And as a result, it was just so much easier to reason about and work with as a result. If you're kind of interested in that sort of level scale, then please go read his work. I won't dig into it. But we get another interesting debate. There's the whole synchronous versus asynchronous. I think the web in some ways has destroyed and set back computing quite a long time. I started in the 1980s and I seen the advent of the web. So I was involved in the internet back when we used RN and 10 and newsgroups. Document fetching. And then people sort of took this hammer and then beat every single computer science problem on the planet into the same shape, that everything is request response. So a protocol designed for fetching documents has now become the main programming model we used. And it kind of reignited RPC all over again. It's like we've had a number of generations who've run at that wall, realized that wall's got big spikes and backed off. But we've got a new generation running at the same wall again. Eventually we'll realize that it's not a good idea, probably fix it. And you just start looking at the simple mathematics of it. Like take the performance case alone. If I have a synchronous interaction, I send a request, I get a response. I send a request, get a response. We see how time gets stretched out when we interact synchronously with something. If we change that and make the latency greater, so move things further apart, takes a lot of time. What I'm finding is my free request can't be completed in the same amount of time. We're bound by the latency of the system. And whenever we're in this phase, we're having to incur a lot of overhead. So if we send a request and we have to block, we have to have the operating system get involved, suspend our threads, wait for the response, have the operating system wake us up again. That's a very high overhead. It's like trying to have a conversation with getting the lawyers involved and everything. The overhead is very significant. And most people are not aware because they don't measure the tellers on a regular occurrence. But if we go to asynchronous, we can just send a request. We send another, we send another. We don't wait for the responses straight away. And then separately, we get the responses back together again. Look how time is much more compressed. Now, if I increase the latency, those things change. But when you throw my requests and still not have that big an impact, you can't run away from mathematics. But for me, what's interesting is what's happening while you're waiting. Well, you can be doing other things. You're able to make progress in other areas. You don't block and wait. You don't have to suspend them. Now we're inventing means and languages like ASIC await and doing all sorts of stuff to get around the fact that we program. We can't deal with different things. I get to teach concurrency quite regularly. I'm starting to notice some patterns. A lot of the people I've found who are good at programming have something else in common. Many of them are good at cooking. That seems kind of strange. If you can do multiple things concurrently, deal with things happening at the right time and having good sequencing of time, that's exactly the same problem. You try to cram things into different ways. Again, you get but that synchronous is so much easier. It's like we're living with an industry of crybabies. Yet some things are a little bit difficult, but you practice and you get better and you can get tooling in place. Like if you were learning to cook and say, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this, like I'm going to make a big dinner. Well, sorry, you're going to take 20 hours to do it because I'm not going to do anything concurrently. Oh yeah, but this stuff's cold and well, I'll just heat it until it's dried out and tell people to eat it. No, just don't accept that. We do synchronous is blocking, it's terrible, it's kind of wrong. You can think about managing state. And we can do that quite easy. We manage state, we manage it with feedback. All interactions work best when we've got the proper feedback in place. And we're just blocking, not making progress. We can't do that. We've got techniques like state machines and other things that work really nicely that have been around for a long time. But the whole abdication of responsibility and thinking about feedback is something that seems to also be a crazy thing that's happening. Like back in Claude Shannon's original paper on information theory in the 1940s, he explained the importance of feedback. We know this in everyday life. Like anybody ever go home, you have a conversation with your partner and you say, can you have this done? And if you don't get a response, you don't get feedback, do you assume that agreement has happened? No, because usually that was horribly wrong. We know the importance of the feedback and so we practice this sort of things. But I know it's going to take time for people to think differently and work differently. So one of the things I encourage people is if you want to design an API, start off with an asynchronous one, wrap it with a synchronous wrapper for the people who kind of cry and can't keep up yet for this. And so keep them happy and we'll move on. But yeah, design to give you options at least and then we can do this. And we have loads of examples. We try to go down a route and then we make mistakes and try to fix it. So we're building RPC, we're building it often on top of HTTP, which is also built on top of TCP. And we find that this doesn't work, it doesn't scale, so we're having to do all sorts of duct-tape things to try and make it right because the model is fundamentally wrong. So TCP has been trying to evolve through, we've added fast open to it to try and improve it. We now have Quick. So if you're actually using a Google browser talking to most Google services, you're not using TCP anymore. We're typically using protocols like Expedient, TCP2 over Quick to try and make this stuff work. So it gives us a much better experience. We've been seeing this recently evolving through TLS 1.2 into 1.3, and a lot of it is about making things efficient, making it better. Like, that is a great spec to go read. There's some poor examples of protocols we put out there, there's some better examples, and even in the good ones, we start making mistakes. So one of the classic things that happened with TLS 1.3 that wasn't foreseen as a problem and hence it becomes obvious kind of later, we have a faster way to start a connection with TLS 1.3. So we've got this zero round trip startup of a connection. This is great, it gives us a nice responsive experience, but it makes us vulnerable to replay attacks. And the only reason it makes us vulnerable to replay attacks is because the protocols that run on top of it are so badly designed. They don't consider certain things. So for example, if your protocol included a sequence number, your application protocol included a sequence number, and you get a replay attack, if you've already seen the sequence number before, you just throw it away. You're not idempotent, you're not subject to a replay attack. Whereas most people are not thinking about designing things and having that state in place. It makes quite a difference. So batching is another good example. Consider the output of a request and our behavior in the real world to show some of our behavior with how we write systems. So let's just continue with the cooking analogy from earlier. We get invited around to a friend's house, they're going to help out, and you arrive and say like, I need some milk. I need some milk to finish the dinner. You go to the shops and get me the milk. You say, yeah, good friend, I'll go to the shops and get some milk. You come back again. Imagine you come back and they said, do you know what, I actually need more milk. Can you go back to the shop again and get me a bit more milk? And so you go to do that, you come back again, and you arrive back and they said, do I actually need more milk and I need some cheese? And you go back, I came over and had a good night. They're all drinking wine and I went back and forth to the shop. This is not kind of good. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't do that sort of behavior. You wouldn't do that when you write software, going to networks, going to disks, doing whatever. Because it's an object, we don't care about it. We know it's got no feelings. We behave in this way. So yeah, we just don't care. We actually do. This is also just a flip. Humans when we want to do nasty things, dehumanize other people. It's kind of part of what we do. I can think like I'm kind of nice to computers in general, so that whenever they kind of take over the world, I'm hoping I'm one of the people that don't matter. So start thinking a little bit. And yes, they don't have feelings, but we have built-in instincts to try and do the right things. Try let some of those built-in instincts actually drive some of our software design. Like good examples of this is what's coming with 100 gigabit Ethernet. Our current APIs and current approaches cannot use 100 gigabit Ethernet properly. The Linux community is having discussions about how we change APIs. The BSD sockets API is not up to doing 100 gigabit. We're having other APIs that are now evolving. So like Linux is already moving into send a message, receive a message for a single system call. Let's send multiple messages and receive